Okay, so the book is called Rest Assured. Very clever. So what do you? Why are you looking at creation through the lens of rest? I think that would catch a lot of people off guard because they don't think of rest as like the thing that's going on in creation. And what kind of work? Well, I'll let you say why the lens of rest, and we can talk about what work that metaphor does for you.
Yeah, so God rested on the seventh day. And so that was one of the big things that really changed for me when I learned that, rest is like saying sitting down kind of at a throne because everything is operating correctly. God can sit on his throne. And that's like a good way to end a cosmogony is to say, yeah, and the deity rests. And it's rest not as in napping, but as in reigning, or like Star Trek, like engaged. We're ready to go, ready to roll. It's like the beginning of something awesome is happening because everything is set up. And so that shift in thinking really really changed a lot of things for me, because if God is reigning, and that's what that means in the end, and it's saying that God has set up the homeostasis and here we go, we're going to run. What does it mean when he asks me to rest? And what does it mean that God is on the throne? First off, in like Genesis, when he gets to the end and he sits down, there's a couple of really interesting conclusions there. One, there was no battle. So what's that about? But then secondly, like what he set up to run perfectly, like to look at that and to say that was the ideal, that was important. And then also to say who is on the throne. So, we all say worship God, God's on the throne, that's great. But I feel like Genesis 1 is saying, but who is God? Like that's what we should be concerned with. Like, and that's what's really, really, really beautiful. And so then once we kind of meditate on who God is on the throne, then our ability to rest is easier, honestly. I'm happier that he is on the throne. That guy who did all that stuff, thank God that is who is on the throne. And if we can put all that together and then understand that our call to rest is to actually say, you are God and I am not, in all the jillion areas that we're worried about, then that just changes a lot of things.
Yeah, it's a hard equation, especially for Americans who are very individualist and then functionally oriented towards we take care of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I got this.
I have all kinds of insurances so that I don't have to trust God for
Yeah.
just about anything, right?
Yeah.
Just have to trust the insurance company. That's not a swipe at insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the nature of our existence.
Yeah.
That would you also see this as a parallel in the we think of the ascension of Jesus as him kind of taking his role as a regent with God, but he does sit at a throne, right? He
Yeah.
ascends to a throne. So is that the same thing going on with Jesus? You can walk away from this one as well.
I mean, it seems like it. I think it seems like there's that second kingdom, idea that the reign has also been inaugurated for this kingdom come, for the restoration plan is beginning this big arc, and that's a huge piece of it. So yeah, I think it's on purpose. I think it's a shadow and a mirror and all of those things.
And I know my Jewish listeners will be leaning in right now because it sounds like what you're suggesting is rest means a lot of work in preparation so that you can sit and things will run, right? Which tends
Yeah.
to be around the Jewish holidays. This is happening, especially Pesach.
Yeah.
But even every week, you have to coordinate your week so that you can sit and let things run, right? Okay, when you talk about Sabbath in the church, do you we have this discussion, I was a pastor getting people say, hey, like it's good to take a Sabbath. Like it's, there's atheists or books written by atheists that are suggesting people should take a Sabbath. But I've come to also realize that it's disingenuous to tell people to take a Sabbath if they're not working 6 days a week. So, which also both sides offend Americans,
Yeah.
right? That you should tell them like, hey, you need to stop working 1 day a week and do something else. And also, like, you need to work 6 days a week, not a weekend. So, do you see both sides operating here in the creation narrative?
I do think there's like a 6-1 rhythm for sure. I think the idea of seven is interesting in that it might not have been like if I think about sitting around that campfire, right, and they're listening in, and he says we get to the end and it's day one. Like I feel like the campfire would lean in and be like, how many days are we going? Right? Because seven was really special. Seven meant something really interesting was happening. It was kind of a combination of sacred and lovely. Like seven meant something. And so when they get to day two, and then three, and then four, like I feel like the campfire would be like, how many are we going to?
Right.
Like that's really fun. And so I think the seven is interesting in that way. And then when God does, starts with the Exodus and the manna from heaven, it's definitely the 6-1 rhythm, right? So you get the
Right.
6 and this one, and then 6 and then 1. And then the prophets, later on when they talk to him, they're kind of upset at what's happening at the 6, and they're upset with what's happening with the 1. Like they're supposed to be a cohesive unit, not just separated. And so I do think it's interesting that in creation it is one event, and it is recognizing the rain on one day, but then operating within the functions that God has given you in the 6. But if you're doing the 6 wrong, then the 1 isn't going to work out either.
Right.
Like you can't toggle it and pick and choose, which is all of the prophets that they're pounding about. And then you get to the Pharisees and to the other books later where they're adding the rules and the guardrails, and they're like, look, we have to do the 6 right and we have to do the 1 right. Like they're just really, really concerned about that because they're concerned about holiness and they care. And it's really, I think it was a fair concern to have because they'd really messed it up. And Jesus is like, wow, turns out not quite. Let's reframe it just a touch.
Right. Hey there, if you've benefited from this content at all, please hit the like and subscribe, or subscribe and like, one of those or both of them together on this video. It helps us tremendously with the math algorithm nerd monsters. And like so many things with the Pharisees, he both affirms their desire to be holy and to establish traditions of holiness where there's a lot of improvisation needed, but then chastises them for doing that and not taking on the weightier matters of the law and integrating those, right? So it's part of Jesus' shtick as a prophet. When I was, this is probably 12, 13 years ago, when I was working on this book on ritual thinking within the biblical text, it was for the first time in my life, I went through the prophets and it stood out to me, wow, they talk about Sabbath a lot.
Right?
It might be one of the most talked about recurring topics across the prophets, and to the point where you get to Isaiah, and it's like eunuchs and foreign people who keep my Sabbaths will have a greater inheritance in the new heavens and new earth, right? And you're like, well, that was surprising. The one that keeps the Sabbath, you thought it would be keep the Torah. It might even be shorthand for keeping the Torah, right? Justice of the land. So I think it is a bit surprising. I wonder functionally how you view in a Christian life. I know people are going to take very different stances and strong and weaker on this, but like, what does Sabbath look like in the weekly Christian life for you?
I mean,
You don't have to prescribe anything.
yeah, for me personally, if I can get to the end of a Sabbath and realize you are God and I am not, I feel like that was a win. Like, I feel like it's about reorienting my kingdom to his kingdom. And there's just this subtle misunderstanding that grows in my 6 days into my kingdom, my schedule, my, even my things I want to do for Jesus, right? Like I just build myself a house every stinking week. I can't seem to help it. And the 7th day, whatever guardrails you need to set up for yourself, I think it's getting to the spot where you aren't doing or building your own set of things. And so sometimes, that can look like rest. Sometimes that can look like family time. Sometimes that looks like preparing in the 6 so that you can take the 1 off. I think that one's different for everyone, and I'd be pretty hesitant to prescribe that. Because, in your reading about Sabbath, you probably saw there's like hardly any words about it. Like keep it. And you're like, how? And there is just hardly a stinking thing. Like there's hardly any rules around it. And I think that's on purpose. I think that's so that we recognize the King, like specifically. I think going to church is like the very best way to celebrate Sabbath, because that is absolutely that heart orientation shift that happens there. And so that would be my number one. Like if I had to give somebody something, I would say go one day a week and make sure you mark that one day and start it at least, you know.
Now, some people will get very particular about go one day a week. They'll say, no, the Sabbath is the Sabbath. I mean, there's a Jewish tradition of the eternal Sabbath that, all years are marked off in actual metaphysical time and space. So I take it you're not a Friday to Saturday, sundown to sundown Sabbath person.
No, I don't see a ton of reason personally for me to adhere to the strict timeline of that. I think it's a lot more about the principle than the thing. And I think Jesus does that too when he's, he actually intentionally does a lot of healing miracles on the Sabbath. And I think that's partly because he's declaring his kingship, but he's telling them, I'm doing this restorative act. I'm trying to pull us back and forward into what he designed it to look like. So of course he can do that. The King can do that. In particular, he should do that on Sunday. That's who he is.
Yeah, so even there, and you're right. I mean, Sabbath is almost an entirely improvised ritual, right? It's like a set-aside day, but there's no direction. So it makes sense that if the Pharisees and the people who cared about following the Torah were going to fight about anything, it was going to be the Sabbath, because that, like, you get nothing. You get almost nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't get much more with baptism or communion either.
Yeah.
There's a ton of improvisation with both of those. So I wonder what role. So looking back at creation, you put Sabbath or the resting of God as kind of his enthronement, his kingdom. And going back to your comment that you kind of casually threw in there, which I thought was kind of mind-blowing, is that if you're a Hebrew hearing this story, or anybody else, you are thinking, wait, how many days is this going to go? So how do you, what do you think is the significance of the breaking up of a week like that? My friend Josh Berman, he casually blew my mind with this statement. He goes, oh, months, days, years are all lunar and solar. Like they're all directly referenced off of some celestial event.
Wow.
There is
Yeah.
no such 7-day anything
Yeah.
in creation, right? It's a completely artificial thing. So
Yeah.
how does that fit within the ancient Near East? Would that blow their minds, or they'd be like, oh yeah, everybody does 7-day weeks?
I don't know about the 7-day weeks. I know they did I don't know how they did time. I know they did ritual. And I guess when I was studying it and looking it up, I just started looking up what's like a priestess installation. What is, a dedication for a temple or a shrine and just kind of started reading through that. There was one that was like a love letter that I found, and he was like, I love you 7 ways. Let me count them, and he was like jumping on the 7 theme. And so I didn't necessarily look at like the days, like the marking of the days, but more like why did he pick 7? Like what would 7 have triggered for them in their mind? And I think it would have triggered like special and holy and sacred and intentional, like marked out, right? So that was, I don't know, that I thought that was really fun to think about the campfire,
Yeah. Of how various people would have heard that, like, oh,
Yeah.
talking about something marked out.
Yeah, I don't know any other days marked out like that. I've read all the creation ones I can get a hold of, and nobody else is very intentional with it. The days thing is kind of unique in Genesis, and so that's something worth noting, right? When they start off without a battle or without a conflict, there's always chaos. But when he starts it with the chaos and the day, right? Like, that's fascinating.
I've just had a thought. I'm going to look it up right now.
Yeah.
Utnapishtim in the flood narrative, I think, is it 7 or 9 days? No, it's 7 days of the flood in the
And where?
Gilgamesh. This is the Gilgamesh Tablet 11, if I remember correctly. the Utnapishtim narrative. So he has 7 days
Okay.
rather than 40 days of rain, and then 100 whatever days is in
The
the flood.
seven's interesting for that.
Yeah,
Huh.
I
I have to
hadn't
think
thought
about
about it
that.
until you just said that just now. Okay, so yeah, seven shows up in various ways that would have been familiar. In the same way that I guess hundred, in our culture, hundreds, decimals, right?
Yeah.
Round decimal numbers kind of feel natural to us in some way, or they have numbers have a feel to them, right? If I said
Yeah.
27, that feels weirder than 20 for
Yeah. Or if
all
it was
kinds of
like, he ran 100 yards, you'd be
right,
like, oh, he was scoring a touchdown.
right,
Like
right.
you just
Ah, yeah, that's a
automatically
great example. Yeah,
insert it into your category, when you hear certain things. And I feel like they would have gotten to seven and the rest, and the fact that there had been no battle, and it was all goodness. Like I feel like that would have been like the collision of so many different, mind blowing ideas. It's just really lovely. Yeah.
yeah.